privacy rights, because for privacy rights, there are actually going to be a handful of amendments that are really going to come together to interpret privacy. Now, I want to explain this in such a way because it's very ambiguous. There's nothing in the Constitution or the Bill of Rights anywhere that says privacy. It doesn't exist. So we have to interpret a few things and pull from a few different areas to kind of just create privacy rights. We're going to pull from the Third Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, and the Ninth Amendment to make up our privacy rights. Now, I want to do this. Be certain that you get down which amendments make up the right to privacy, but I want to go ahead and project just what these amendments say. Don't worry about writing down the amendments itself. I'm never going to ask you about that, but I do want to just use this to kind of point out how this is privacy. First up, in the Fourth Amendment, you have protection from unreasonable searches and seizures. Now, I'm so glad you guys brought up those searches in regards to privacy, because if you have a warrant, that's a legal search. If you do not have a warrant, you can't search them. So let's just assume they did not have that warrant at his school. Daniel, you're absolutely right. That's a violation of privacy, because if they didn't have a warrant, they can't search anything. Now again, does it say anything in here about privacy? No, we have to interpret. Yes, Javier?
What if there's a probable cause?
I believe it was half of you got the when you have a warrantless search that's acceptable. I forget if your cohort did or not. So speaking of things I had to cross out of your final exam,
Yeah.
there are some instances where you can have a warrantless search and they're acceptable. There's a number of them actually. Just a,
It's the same thing I was because wouldn't it be kind of reasonable for him to the cops to go to the school and didn't do anything because his dad was involved or something like that?
if you're going to go somewhere else, you probably get a warrant. Warrantless searches are kind of like in the middle of like a hot pursuit. Then you can have warrantless searches, but you better be buttoned up nicely, or else you get exclusionary rule. Now, next thing is Ninth Amendment. Now, remember, we talked about Ninth Amendment simply means you have rights beyond what are listed. So can you have privacy rights? Yeah, based on Ninth Amendment, you can. It's just a matter of how you interpret it. Now, the last one's the Third Amendment. Now, you guys were saying when we first started this very small unit that you said Third Amendment was least important. Because you say soldiers aren't going to come to your home and knock on your door. You're absolutely right. It's true. But you can interpret this by saying that a soldier is a member of the government. They can't come into your home. So we tie these three together to say you have privacy. Now, is it kind of a stretch to tie all these together and say, oh, that means you have privacy? Kinda. But if you extrapolate it, you can say, yeah, you do have some privacy rights. So here's the next thing. Now is when you got to write the rest of these things down. So let's talk about right to privacy in regards to how it works between the government and your privacy. Now again, there's nothing written in the Constitution or the Bill of Rights about do you have privacy, but we interpret and say, to a certain extent, yes, you do. You have the right to a private and personal life free of intrusion from the government. So what that means is you have protection from the government reading your text messages. But they do. I see some worried faces out there. They can read your text messages. They can do that. They can listen to your phone calls. But there is very much a dividing line. If they believe you are a threat, a potential criminal, they can read all your text messages. So start deleting. Except for you, Doug. I would start deleting immediately. All it takes is for them to say, we believe that you're a threat. Now, with that said, if you're not a threat, they can't read your text messages. That's a violation of privacy. But I do want to be certain that I highlight this. My teenagers, anything you post is fair game and public information. put anything on Facebook, Instagram, anything, that's all public knowledge. Whatever you post, you might as well put it on a billboard, because anyone can take it and post it somewhere else. It's public information. So delete everything. I'm looking at you, Doug. Delete it all. You just burn it all, bleach bit, everything you got, okay? Now, text messages are a little different because it's from one person to another. That's private, but it can be made public. Now, in regards to what it says in the Constitution, like I said, it doesn't state anything in there about a level of privacy. So it really is very nebulous. We can't necessarily pinpoint and say, oh, this is private, this is not. It's all up in the air because there's no guarantees. So every year the court takes cases on what's private, what's public. And they can never really nail it down. The best way that they can explain it, and I'm going to use their words here, is a reasonable expectation of privacy. Where if you are in a public place and you say something to another person, you cannot say, oh, that's a private conversation. The language that the court uses is, discovery happened when in a place in which the average person would be offended at being intruded upon. So I use this example. If you're just on like a public train, if you're on light rail, and you say something to a friend of yours, you cannot say, that was a private conversation, because you're in public. This is the same way that the court interprets social media. They say if you're on social media, you're basically in a public space. So anything you post is considered to be public. Do not expect any kind of privacy if we're talking social media. Now, I had just enough time to get to where I wanted to be. I want to ask any questions on privacy, because this is where I wanted to get. You got it. When I see you tomorrow,